Greetings, class. We're here for lecture number 2 from the book Minority Studies. We're going to be looking at, it's a very long read. I told you in the syllabus it's a long read, and this is a lot of information to absorb. And I'm just going to be highlighting some of the things that I think are important for us to know and be able to talk about. The first thing that I want to point out is the triangle trade. And put it in your notes that Dr. Turley refers to this as the industrial slave trade. We get the idea somehow that there were just random boats cruising around grabbing people, when in fact actually Africa had been divided up by the colonial powers, and sections of it were divided up and earmarked for certain countries to have a slave trade. Also, Toussaint the Liberator in Haiti, 1805, he forms a revolution and outlaws slavery, liberates the island. Why is it that we don't know more about him? And as somebody who can look at information from the conflict perspective, I would say because that doesn't favor power. That has never favored the way that white folks who have constructed history books want us to learn. Want you to know the Fugitive Slave Act, the debate between Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois, the section on declining significance of race. A lot of confusion about that in that Wilson sometimes has been said, Wilson says that race doesn't matter. It's not that race doesn't matter. It's that the institutions, particularly the economic structure of the country, formulated by white Europeans, seems to basically only reward white Europeans and systematically takes away from black folks. And his point is that it's that relationship, the years of no equal pay, being in segregated neighborhoods, that's why African Americans are disadvantaged today. Just so you know, have this in your notes, Douglas Massey differs from Wilson on this. He says, no, actually, color lines still matter, and that there's something called hypersegregation. Not just being segregated, but being in neighborhoods that are disproportionately unemployed, on welfare, segregated. When we look at that, Massey points out that white poverty doesn't look like black poverty. When somebody is African American in poverty, they're more likely to have the surrounding census tracts also be in poverty and being majority black, while white poverty isn't that way, and that is a significant difference. Also want you to point Daniel Moynihan, former senator from New York, Democrat, wrote a thing called The Negro Family. And in that, we get this sort of idea that there's something wrong with black culture. And a lot of people, a guy named Louis Kozer, jumps into this, that it's the dissolution of the black family, and that's what's going on. And it really kind of devolves into a blame the victim narrative. Moving on to Native Americans, I want you to know what blood quantum is. This is the idea that the federal government is engaged in finding out a percentage, a certificate of blood to be Native American. Also, paying attention to the numbers, whether it's 2 to 12 million or 5 million. By 1900, that's 237,000 Native Americans left in the census. So by any stretch, that is definitely a genocide. Pay attention to the Clovis people, Chaco Canyon, know the Dawes Act, and read about boarding schools. Our secret word of the lecture is Bernie Sanders, senator from Vermont. So that's your secret word. Paying attention to Asian Americans, model minority. Now, again, this is used a couple of times in different books. It's this idea that oh, well, Asians, they're good at math. In other words, it's not by struggle and achievement, it's just somehow they're good at something, or they're naturally okay with the power dynamic in our culture. So they go, oh, I can't blank minority be like Asians. No, the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act, also have it in your notes that that's roughly after the railroads are built. One of the reasons that Americans were so enthusiastic about having Chinese labor. It's renewed, that Exclusion Act was renewed a couple of times. By 1924, it applies to all Asians, restricting immigration. 1942, FDR puts Order 9066. This is the internment order for Japanese American citizens. Again, the key there for us to remember is those were American citizens. They may have been of Japanese ancestry, but they were Americans. Most of them were Americans. And because of that, by 1989, George Bush, Republican, puts down for basically reparations for Japanese Americans that were interned, a recognition that that was both wrong and illegal. We move to Hispanic Americans. Strong history here that I think European Americans are often dismissive of, particularly I've noticed in the latest discussion of immigration from Mexico, as if people that are Hispanic or people from Mexico shouldn't be here. When in fact, actually, remember, Columbus's expedition is actually financed by the Spanish crown, followed by Pizarro destroying the Incas, De Soto discovering Mississippi. My history book actually said that it said in high school that De Soto discovered the Mississippi. What a news article! What an update for all the Native Americans that have been living there for thousands of years. Thank God De Soto arrived to discover them. 1914, key moment in both Hispanic history and labor history, the Ludlow Massacre. While striking, mostly Hispanic workers were attacked by the National Guard and private detectives by the mining company, including machine gunning American citizens, resulting in the deaths of dozens of women and children. 1943, the Zoot Suit Riot, read about that, and the Bracero program. Again, I bring that up because we have this idea somehow, again, in this latest iteration in our elections, for our lecture today, is that Mexican labor is bad or unneeded or hurts us, when in fact, actually, we've invited Mexican nationals, Mexican Americans, to engage in agricultural labor because they were skilled at it and American whites didn't seem to want to. And also make a note that back in 1930, we've tried this deportation thing. They deported over 1 million people in 1930s when Hoover did a very similar thing to President-elect Trump and deported Mexican nationals and actually Mexican Americans. They were just grabbed off the streets, hundreds and hundreds fired from industrial places like Ford, and then forcibly deported, many of them American citizens. But when grabbed by the police, they didn't have their documents on them, and they were just put on trains and shipped out. It caused devastation to the agricultural industry. So please look at that and do your reading, and we'll get to next week's lecture, which will start about the chapter on power from our lives. Okay? Thank you.